So, what happens when a global giant in the dental world suddenly has the rules changed on them in their single biggest market? Well, that's exactly the story of Dentium. They were forced into this massive, high stakes strategic pivot. Today, we're going to break down how they handled this crisis. And it's a really fascinating story about adapting on the fly and some wild innovation. Let's get into it.
All right, before we dive in, just a quick but important heads up. All the information we're talking about today is for reference, okay? Any investment decisions you make are, of course, your own responsibility. Now, let's get to the heart of the problem that Dentium was facing. I mean, just imagine this for a second. You're running an incredibly successful company, and then, bam, overnight, your number one customer, we're talking an entire country here, just completely changes the rules of the game. That's the exact spot Dentium found themselves in, and it makes for an amazing case study on how to navigate huge, unexpected shocks to your business. To really understand the size of this challenge, you first have to appreciate just how big of a player Dentium actually is. This isn't some tiny startup. They are a real force to be reckoned with in the dental industry. Okay, so on the world stage, Dentium has a solid 5% of the entire dental implant market. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but in this industry, that is massive. It puts them right up there in the top tier, ranking somewhere around 6th or 7th globally, going toe-to-toe with the biggest names in medical tech. And back on their home turf in South Korea, they are even more of a beast. They've got a whopping 25% market share, making them the clear, undisputed number 2 player. So what we're looking at is a company with a really strong global footprint and a totally dominant position at home. But their biggest opportunity, and as it turns out, their biggest risk, was somewhere else entirely. And that, of course, brings us to China. For years, China was the growth engine for Dentium. It accounted for more than half of their total revenue. Then, the government introduced a new policy that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. This new policy is called Volume-Based Procurement, or VBP for short. Here's the basic idea. Instead of individual hospitals buying dental implants, the government itself steps in and says, hey, we're going to buy a massive, massive number of these all at once through a national bidding process. You can think of it like the government negotiating a giant countrywide bulk discount to bring down healthcare costs. Now, if you just glance at the results from that first round of VBP bidding, you'd probably think Dentium hit a home run. They locked in orders for 450,000 units. That's huge, second only to their main competitor. So on the surface, that looks amazing, right? They secured a ton of volume. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. To win that massive order, they had to slash their prices. The VBP policy basically forced a price drop of over 20%. So you're stuck in this weird spot where you've secured sales, but the money you make on each sale just plummeted. And to make things worse, China's economy was slowing down, so overall demand wasn't even that great. This win was actually a major blow. The game had totally changed, and Dentium desperately needed a new strategy. Dentium's comeback plan was this really brilliant 3-part strategy. So part 1, get aggressive about geographic diversification. It was painfully clear they just couldn't be so dependent on one single market anymore, no matter how big it was. So they started pushing and pushing hard into other fast-growing markets. Russia has turned into a particularly huge success story for them, with exports just soaring. At the same time, they're making major moves in places like Vietnam, Thailand, and India, basically building up a whole new set of revenue streams to take the pressure off of what was happening in China. Okay, so pillar number 2 of their strategy was to go deeper with the customers they already had. The idea was to stop just selling a product, the implant itself, and start selling an entire system, an entire ecosystem. The goal? To become the essential one-stop shop for any modern digital dental clinic. It's a move designed to build some seriously sticky customer loyalty. It all starts right at the beginning with the diagnosis. Dentium's Bright CT scanner gives dentists these incredibly sharp, detailed 3D images. This lets them plan an implant procedure with just pinpoint accuracy. So you see, it's not just about selling a scanner. It's about owning the very first and most critical step of the whole treatment. And from there, the process flows right into other equipment, like these in-office milling machines. This technology literally lets a clinic design and create a custom crown for a patient right there, on the spot. By selling this whole suite of connected tools, from the initial scan to the final product, Dentium creates this powerful lock-in effect. Once a clinic invests in the equipment, trains its staff, and builds its entire workflow around the Dentium system, the idea of switching to a competitor becomes a huge, expensive headache. All right, so the first two strategies make perfect sense, right? Spread out your risk to new countries and sell more stuff to your current customers. But this third part of Dentium's plan, this is where things get really, really wild. They decided to jump into a completely different industry, clean energy. So you're probably asking, how on earth does a dental company pivot into the energy sector? Well, the secret, it turns out, was hiding in plain sight. It was inside the very material that they had already perfected for years. And that material is zirconia. It's this super high-tech ceramic. It's known for being incredibly strong and biocompatible, which is what makes it absolutely perfect for dental implants. But as it turns out, zirconia has another very special, hidden talent. Okay, so here's how it all connects, and I'll keep it simple. First, Dentium was already a world-class expert in making super high-purity zirconia. That was their core skill. Then they realized that at very high temperatures, we're talking over 700 degrees Celsius, this material can actually conduct oxygen ions. And that unique property is the absolute key to making something called solid oxide fuel cells, which can generate clean electricity from hydrogen. It's just a classic case of a company taking what it's best at, in this case, material science, and using it to jump into a totally new and potentially huge new market. So there you have it, a three-part pivot in the face of a massive crisis. They diversified their markets to lower the risk, they integrated their products to lock in customers, and they innovated in a totally radical way to build a brand new future. Which leaves us with a really fascinating question. Can this incredibly bold strategy actually turn Dentium's biggest threat into its greatest opportunity for growth?